Welcome back to another episode of Brass Sack Bodybuilding. I am joined today by Adam Katz yet again.
So
How many episodes have you done together?
I don't know, like 5, 10, something.
Yeah, you're technically like the co-host.
Basically,
And today we're going to talk about the pump,
pump.
all the good things about it, the bad things about it. Cialis, Tadalafil, if it's placebo, if it is real, we'll get into all the nitty-gritty aspects of it. But I think first we should start off just by basically breaking down what really is a pump. I feel like you could probably, I mean, obviously it's just, training, pushing blood into the muscle, you're gonna look fuller. Give us a scientific explanation breakdown as to how you would define the pump with your recent. Did you just graduate?
Yeah, a few months ago in
Yeah.
December.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So put it into scholarly words.
All right. This is all kind of rusty, but I'm gonna say it's uh hyperemia. I think that's the word, where you have just a large influx of blood, and the blood contains, a bunch of nutrients. It contains, the nutrients that you're eating, so amino acids, glucose, triglycerides, as well as other metabolites. So, IGF-1, testosterone, all these things that can help with muscle growth. So I'd say a pump is really just the influx of blood and all those constituents of blood going into a muscle and swelling it up, as simple as it is, really. Um,
Mhm. All those things
yeah.
are contained within the blood being sent to the muscle that you're being trained. So that brings up a question because I know that Milos is a big advocate for this, obviously with the use of insulin. The use of amino acids, the use of obviously we don't need the presence of insulin to utilize intra-workout carbs or EAAs, but just having that in addition to those intra-workout supplements uh can make somewhat of a I don't know, I don't want to say substantial because it's definitely not substantial, but have any positive effect, sending blood that has more of the nutrients in it versus the opposite end, which would have less, right? More amino acids, more glucose, and things of that nature.
I think it's a good theory, and supposedly it works. People like taking insulin pre-workout to help shuttle a bunch of nutrients into the muscle. So, uh, is it necessary to build muscle? Are you not building muscle if you're not taking insulin? Obviously not. Um, But if you just think about what you're actually doing, you're helping facilitate the recovery process. And I think that's really where the pump comes into play, is to help with recovery. You know, a lot of people think that, if I can get a better pump, that's going to build more muscle, when I think that's more of a secondhand mechanism, where what really builds muscle is mechanical tension. Training
Mm,
heavy, loading the muscle on the eccentric, getting a full range of motion, progressive overload. That's what builds muscle. That's what builds muscle fibers to get bigger. But some people take that too far and say that's the only thing that's important when it comes to building muscle. And if you're training for a pump, then you're taking away from, the progressive overload, heavy training that you could be doing. Where I think you can benefit from doing all of it. You can use more tools in your tool belt. And I think that if you do get a good pump, not only is that just obviously indicative that things are going right, that you're still insulin sensitive, that you're using the right muscle. Like if you're getting a huge pump in your traps on lateral raises and you're not really feeling it in your side delts, yeah, you're scientifically performing the right anatomical, movement. But that's why the mind muscle connection matters. That's why the pump matters. Is it tells you you're using the right muscle, first of all. Um, that you're eating enough food, things like that, taking enough or drinking enough water, eating enough sodium. But I think the merit in getting a pump and trying to train for that, whether it's the beginning of the workout, at the end of the workout, it has multiple benefits. If you're doing it at the beginning of the workout, it can help establish that mind muscle connection on those heavier movements. It can make it to where you don't need to go as heavy so that you can save your joints a little bit better. But then, even doing it at the end of the workout can help push more nutrients into the muscle, or really doing it anytime in the workout, and helping to push more of those amino acids, the glucose, the growth factors. pushing these all into the muscle in larger amounts theoretically could help with recovery. So why not do it? And also, who doesn't like getting a pump? Also, so that's my
Yeah.
theory.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like any workout where you don't get a pump kind of sucks. At the beginning, you said if you're not, you can't, it's not like you can't build insulin if you're not using insulin, obviously. But then it just made me think, if you're insulin resistant, how much of a disadvantage are you at for building muscle if you are
Yeah.
resistant, which I guess is an entirely different conversation, but you would obviously be at a disadvantage if you're not, producing enough endogenous insulin as it is.
Uh, it's so with insulin resistance, that's more at the receiving end of the
Mm-hmm.
muscles. It's the exact opposite of what I'm saying. So I'm saying if you're insulin sensitive, and you're using the endogenous insulin or exogenous insulin to push those extra nutrients and all that blood with the training, getting a pump, you're pushing more nutrients into the muscle that theoretically could help with recovery. But what you're saying is the exact opposite, is if you're insulin resistant, you're not gonna be able to push as many nutrients into the muscle. You're not gonna be able to push as much glucose into the muscle, as much growth factors, and you're potentially going to slow down the rate of muscle growth and specifically recovery from the training. Yeah, sure,
Mm-hmm.
you can recover, but I'm sure there's like a range of like you can recover and maybe build a little bit of muscle, or you can recover and you can build more muscle. And so if you're optimizing everything, you're optimizing your sleep, you're optimizing your protein intake in the whole day, your stress levels, things like that, then you can kind of optimize that range of how much muscle are you actually building from a workout or from a week or a month or months of a workout by, being insulin sensitive and not being insulin resistant.
Yeah.
That
I'm
makes
just
sense.
trying to bring to light the fact that insulin plays a major part. So if you're resistant just as a natural athlete, or even if you're not natural, it doesn't really matter. You're not using insulin, you're at a disadvantage. So then we obviously know insulin's like one of the most anabolic hormones, right? You take exogenous insulin, that obviously puts you at an advantage, but then how much more of an advantage when we use all those things intra workout? It's like, is there a point of diminishing returns where there can only be the ceiling is like so high, or is it just like, we can maximize growth by sending a fuck ton of nutrients in and with more exogenous insulin as well?
It depends on if you're using short acting or long acting insulin. So if you're using a long acting insulin, just to have a larger amount of insulin throughout the whole day, that's not really going to help very much with the recovery process. That's more kind of like the idea of HRT in a way, to where it's like
Yeah.
you're just trying to supplement the insulin that you're normally producing. But what you're talking about is short acting insulins for the purpose of getting a better pump and forcing more nutrients and more blood into the muscle, or more specifically the nutrients. Um, I would say obviously there is a cap to it. Like your muscle is only so big, can only store
Mm-hmm.
so much glycogen. Um, so I don't think that like I think it can be beneficial of like, yeah, if you're using insulin, then you could theoretically be pushing more nutrients into the muscle. You could be eating more food too. So like let's say hypothetical numbers, let's say you can only absorb, let's say 200 grams of carbs into the muscle, or 500, whatever. Uh, but and then after you go over that number, let's say if you can only have 200 grams of carbs converted into glycogen, and then you eat 300 grams, where's the extra 100 grams if you only have so much insulin to take it to the muscle? You can only absorb so much glycogen into the muscle from that amount of insulin, from that amount of carbs. But if you want to eat more carbs and store more into the muscle, you can take a little extra insulin on top of what you would normally produce, because bodybuilders are not normal humans. So it kind of allows you to absorb more into the muscle. So basically partition more nutrients into the muscle and, get really full, obviously, and help with that recovery process. Um, and that's, assuming that you're doing it around the training. Uh, so it's like, yeah, it can be beneficial, but then also it can also just be a false reality of progress. So that's another reason. That's a reason not to use insulin, because then it's like, oh, you're fuller than you actually are. You're building more muscle than you actually are. And then when you stop taking insulin, when you come off cycle, then it's like, okay, how much muscle did you actually build? So
Yeah. Um, I don't think we have any, there's no research on that, is there? I don't think there's any research on people using insulin pre-workout with EAAs and carb powders to see what the actual difference would be over a long time frame, there's no way there's a study on that.
On bodybuilders, definitely not. I
No.
think the only research that you can look at would be anecdotal evidence of like Milos working with, Samson or Regan or, guys like that, where they probably noticed a good difference from. And I'm sure other guys have used insulin, I'm sure, and have noticed a good benefit from it. So it's like, do you need a study to prove that it works?
Mm.
You know,
You
it
just
works
kind of
or
just
not.
have to understand the mechanisms of how it really works. But I just wonder to what extent is really, an actual difference versus what could potentially just be placebo, like you said, they just look fuller, feel fuller. Because if you also look at a lot of those guys, a lot of them just have a ton of inflammation all the time too. And if you look at them on stage, you can usually see that they're never really like dry. They always have like that fuller look and they're just inflamed.
Especially with those guys that Samson or that Milos is coaching. But
Yeah.
another interesting thing about using insulin is if you use too much for too long, you're basically going to make yourself insulin resistant.
Mm-hmm.
Assuming that you're, not cutting, obviously, but if you're bulking and you're using insulin for 5, 10 years, like it's going to be a lot harder to continue to build muscle at the rate that you've been building it with insulin. So, you know, because you're putting more insulin into your body, that's kind of the same idea as overeating, where now your pancreas is producing more insulin. So what happens when you have too much insulin knocking on the doors of the muscle cells saying, "Hey, let me in." Muscle cells say, "No, we're too busy, we're too full." And so that creates a level of insulin resistance at the muscle cell, where now you have a buildup of blood glucose because it's not going anywhere, or it's going to go into the fat cells, and then the fat cells become insulin resistant, and then you're actually insulin resistant, and then your blood glucose starts to increase because it can't go anywhere. And that's the process of type 2 diabetes that you were kind of talking about earlier, where it doesn't start with a lack of production. It becomes the lack of production of insulin, where you start off by having too much food and too much insulin production. Muscles say, "Hey, we're too full." Then it goes to the fat cells. The fat cells say, "All right, that's enough." And then you have a buildup of blood glucose, and then you have more production of insulin, more production of insulin, and then eventually the pancreas tires out. The beta cells of the pancreas that produce the insulin, they tire out, they burn off, they die, and then you can't produce as much insulin. Then blood
Yep.
glucose remains to continue to stay high just because people keep eating more and more, and then you're producing less insulin, and then it's pretty bad type 2 diabetes.
And this
So
is this is what happens inevitably throughout the course of almost like every off-season bulk. It's just you need to control to the extent where it doesn't get out of control, which is why you do cutting phases, why you do carb cycling, have days where you have lower blood sugar. You push food nonstop, you are going to inevitably run into that problem. It just might not be to the extent of you actually becoming type 2 diabetic, but that's also a genetic factor as well as your predisposition, because you need to have the predisposition to even be able to get that far for type 2 diabetic.
yeah, but anybody can become a sugar addict, and
Yeah.
then they can also be taking, like, if they want to get into bodybuilding, start taking 10 IUs of growth hormone, and then not doing the cardio, and so they can become really insulin resistant, and then over time they can start to kill those beta cells. And that's the purpose of using a long-acting insulin, is to
Yeah.
take that stress off your pancreas, off the beta cells, so that you don't have to rely on your pancreas to supply the insulin for your whole body from all the food that you're eating. You can kind of, help assist it. That way your pancreas is fine, and then you don't become type 2 diabetic.
I'm just saying like what one person can get away with might be substantially more than somebody else
Yeah,
as far as how much they can push
definitely.
food. And then
Definitely.
as far as using long acting insulin like Lantus,
Yeah.
you're automatically becoming resistant when you put that you're shutting down your endogenous production from your pancreas, are you not?
No, you're not actually. So that's interesting. I when I first ever heard about taking insulin, I thought the same thing. It's like, well, you're taking an exogenous hormone, so wouldn't that shut down endogenous production, like if you're taking testosterone? But with insulin, you're just piling it on top of what you're already producing. Your pancreas, because it's so important that if your pancreas is not working properly, you're gonna die really quickly from not having enough insulin, and then you become hyperglycemic, or if you produce too much insulin, you become hypoglycemic and you die. So your pancreas is pretty resilient. It's not just gonna shut down just from taking insulin. So when you take insulin, that's on top of that. That's why you hear, like, when guys take insulin, they have to take carbs with it,
Yeah.
because you have larger amounts of insulin in your bloodstream now, with the normal endogenous production.
Hmm.
Um, and so then, yeah, so it allows you to eat more carbs basically, or eat more food.
I know it doesn't shut down endogenous production with like Humalog and shit like that, but if I took Lantus for 6 months, 6 to 8 months straight, you're telling me my pancreas wouldn't stop exogenous production of insulin?
I don't think so.
Endogenous, not exogenous.
I don't think so. But I would say that if, let's say, you're producing,
Why would it
you're
if
at,
it has no need to?
well, what I'm saying is it may not need to overproduce insulin. So if you're consuming a million grams of carbs, let's say a thousand carbs per day, and your pancreas is producing, let's say 1,000, I use obviously abstract number of insulin. If you already have the insulin in the bloodstream, your pancreas doesn't need to work as hard. So it's not going to overwork itself. And then you're not going to kill off those beta cells. It's still going to work. It's
So
still
it
going to
has to.
produce.
It ultimately comes down to how much you're taking, right? If you abuse Lantus and are taking a bunch to try to eat a shit ton of food and try to maximize your growth, I would assume that if you have
Go
all
hypo.
this, yeah, well, you go hypo if you're not eating enough. You
That's what I'm
force a bunch of
saying.
food, but
That's what I'm saying. Yeah.
at that point, if you're abusing it, I don't see why your pancreas would have any reason to create more, push out insulin.
It'll still produce insulin. It'll just decrease the amount if it doesn't need to overproduce it.
Okay. Yeah. So I wonder if you run Lantus for so long, you take a shit ton, then you stop. I feel like there would be an issue.
I don't think so. I mean, it depends. So if you were, it depends on your beta cells function. So if you were pushing food for too long and relying on Lantus, and then you just stop taking Lantus and you're still eating a bunch of food, then yeah, you're not going to be producing enough insulin and you're becoming reliant on exogenous insulin.
Hmm.
But if you right now, where your pancreas is perfectly fine and you're eating, let's say, a good amount of carbs and you start taking, 10 IUs of insulin or something, um, you're not going to stop producing insulin. And then if you stop taking Lantus, you're going to continue producing like normal after that.
No, but you maybe not entirely stop, but the same thing as if when you become resistant, you push out so much insulin, like you'll eventually, your pancreas will stop and it won't entirely stop producing insulin, but it become less and less. So if you were to stop Lantus after taking it for so long, especially if you're taking a higher amount, I assume like your pancreas would not be pushing out enough insulin as it should be, right?
So the reason why you're when you become insulin resistant, why your pancreas stops producing as much insulin isn't because of a downregulation, just like with downregulation in the HPTA, like with testosterone. It's because the actual cells that produce insulin die and they malfunction and they can't actually produce. That's a forever thing. So once the beta cells die, unless now there's like stem cell therapy, which might be beneficial in the future. But once your beta cells die, they're not coming back. Now you're not going to be able to produce as much insulin as you were before, and that is a part of type 2 diabetes. But just being insulin resistant before you reach that stage, you can just bring your calories down, lose some body fat, and then your insulin production will still be totally fine.
Yeah. Wait, so you said they die permanently, they're never coming back.
Yeah.
Okay, so you take one bulk too far, you basically become borderline type 2 diabetic, right? But you fix it through diet, you get back down, your pancreas, your insulin levels are still permanently affected by that.
Yeah, but this also takes years
Okay.
of continuous pushing the calories. Like someone who's 300 pounds with barely any muscle, they've been pushing the food with no activity. They don't have they're not doing cardio. They're not training the muscles to absorb the glycogen or absorb the glucose into glycogen. And so they're just building fat because they've already reached their capacity of muscle glycogen. So they've already reached that point of insulin resistance a long time ago. And then they started putting on body fat and started putting on body fat. And then that increase in body fat also downregulates insulin signaling in the
Mm-hmm.
muscle. And so, and because of certain hormones that the fat cells produce as they get bigger. And so you have this whole cycle of just insulin resistance. And then over time, as you continue that insulin resistance, because you have a addiction to addiction to dopamine, but also sugar, and then you're not, exercising, you're not using the glycogen that you have, then eventually it's going to come to a point where the pancreas just tires out and the
Yes.
cell. and then
Yes.
that's permanent.
Yeah, that's what. Yeah, well, I just didn't know that it was actually like permanent to the point where there's no reversing that to any extent.
That's why diabetics have to take insulin at a certain point. Not all diabetics, not all type 2 diabetics have to take insulin. It's once you
Hmm.
reach a certain point where your body just, you're not becoming a complete type 1 diabetic where your pancreas doesn't produce any insulin, but you just produce less insulin to where the diabetics end up having to take that insulin because they're not producing enough. And
Hmm.
then on that for life. And that's why it's, you know, it's expensive being a
And that's why
diabetic.
the first course of action is metformin, typically.
Yeah, it's metformin because one is going to help with the uptake of glucose into the muscle, but also for those diabetics, it's going to inhibit the process of gluconeogenesis in the liver, which is where the liver takes amino acids and the glycerol from triglycerides from fat, and it produces more glucose because it thinks, because you're insulin resistant, it thinks that you don't have enough blood glucose because it's saying, "Oh, I'm insulin resistant. I don't have any glucose in here, even though you do." And so then it starts producing more glucose normally because you're insulin resistant, or even if you're fasted and you're not insulin resistant. And so what metformin does is it inhibits that process. It inhibits one of the enzymes in that process of gluconeogenesis to where you stop producing excess glucose from the liver to still help with controlling that blood glucose level. So it works in two ways to control blood glucose to absorb more and to not produce enough or not produce too much in combination with losing body fat and maybe
Hmm.
other drugs to help reduce appetite, like semaglutide or Ozempic. Um, there's a few diabetic drugs also out there.
Is Ozempic considered a diabetic drug?
It was originally made for that, yeah. Now it's used for weight loss, but yeah, I mean, think about what's the treatment for type 2 diabetes, weight loss. So, um, yeah, people realize, oh, well, it blunts my appetite, it slows my um, gastric emptying. It also increases insulin production. So it at first that can be a bad thing because if you have too much insulin production already, then you don't want more insulin, right? But when you have that increase in insulin production, then that helps with shuttling the glucose more into the muscles. So it's harmful at very first, not harmful. It's not exactly what you want at first, but then it ends up working by dumping more glucose into the muscles and getting it out of the bloodstream. But the main purpose of it is to decrease appetite from the acting at the brain and also uh, slowing gastric emptying so that it's harder to eat as much food.
Hmm. It just kind of is like an appetite suppressant, essentially. What is it? Is it glucagon? GLP-1?
It's a so GLP-1 is glucagon like peptide one,
And that's what
which we already produce.
activates the insulin release.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's insulin production, but yeah, GLP-1 we already normally produce. Pretty sure we produce it in our small intestine, and then that goes to the pancreas and causes more insulin production. Think about normally when you eat food, you have glucose in your small intestine ready to be absorbed. Your body's going to be like, okay, so I need to prepare for this, and so I'm going to get ahead of it. But before getting the blood glucose or before getting the glucose from the small intestine into the bloodstream, I'm going to tell the pancreas by sending GLP-1 to produce more insulin to catch that blood glucose to bring it to the muscle. So we already produce it. Now we just can take a whole bunch more of it and really speed up that process and the side effect of it, which also I'm going on a tangent now.
How
Do you want to know how GLP-1 agonists like Ozempic were actually discovered?
they were discovered? I don't know how they were
Yeah.
discovered now.
So it was actually discovered from I think it's the Gila monster.
The what?
It's a Gila monster. It's like the biggest lizard in Arizona.
Oh shit. Okay.
It's like a huge lizard. So they found venom from a Gila monster. So someone got bit by like multiple people got bit by the Gila monster lizard, and they found that a common symptom of all these people that got bit by the lizard was they all went hypoglycemic.
Wow.
And so then they looked at the venom like under a microscope or chemistry lab or whatever it is, and they saw that there was this molecule in there that looked like GLP-1 that we already produce in our bodies.
Hmm.
And they isolated that one molecule from the lizard venom, and then they were able to, make it something that someone can actually take. Then they saw what happened, and they saw the results of it. It decreased the tide, it decreased glucose from the increase in insulin, and so they started making it into a diabetes drug because of that purpose, because of the lizard venom. So that's how Ozempic was discovered.
It's pretty crazy
I know.
how they come to figure this shit out. But
Of all things, a lizard in Arizona venom.
Yeah. I don't even think I ever saw any lizards when I lived there.
Well, they got like Gila, like huge fucking Gila monsters like in the desert.
There were lizards everywhere in Florida. I don't think I ever saw them in Arizona. I never saw a fucking scorpion either. I'm kind of disappointed.
I fucking hated scorpions when I was a kid here.
Do you
You know
have
what a
them
Gila
in your
monster looks like?
backyard? No, I'll look it up.
Uh, when I was a kid, yeah, screen record so people can see what a Gila monster looks like. It's like a big fucking lizard, and
Gila
they're fast.
monster.
Yeah,
Oh, these
G
things. Yeah, I thought
yeah G I
Gila.
L A yeah. Oh no, G I
Yeah,
L A yeah.
let me pull up this fucking picture of it here. It looks pretty fucking.
They can eat a whole fucking animal. They can eat a whole human basically.
Why did I just open Premiere?
Crazy. It's like the deadliest animal in Arizona. I
Let's
think. I don't
see.
know. But I used to have scorpions in my like old houses when I was a kid in
It's
like
like
Phoenix. So
this.
yeah, like the one over on the left. Yeah, all these, yeah. The big fucking
You've seen this thing?
not in person, no. I'm pretty sure it's the Gila monster that Ozempic from look up is GLP-1 from the Gila monster or is it from lizard? GLP-1 from
GLP-1.
lizard venom. I think it's a Gila monster.
Let's see here. Yeah, it says saliva from the Gila monster contains a structural analog of human GLP-1.
Learned that in school.
Yeah, wow. Okay. That's pretty cool. Okay. Anyways, I don't even know what the fuck we were how did you even get into that. Back to the pump. The pump.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
the pump.
So the benefits of the pump during a workout obviously tells you, you're training the muscle. You want to be training your targeting, effectively executing. You are sensitive. Am I paused?
You're lagging. You're
Are
good.
you lagging?
I mean, not on my screen.
I gotta get a zoom. This shit is fucked. Okay. Um,
You're good now.
what would you say are any negatives regarding the pump? We know that. What did you initially say that? Oh fuck! This is a
What?
shit show. No,
What?
Premiere just popped up. I thought the live
Oh
ended. The,
shit.
the, the recording ended. Um, what was I just saying?
Well, you were saying about the pump, and then I was saying something about something. I don't know what you were gonna say.
I feel like I sound like I'm high
Maybe a little bit.
a little bit. Um,
Um,
the negative aspects of a pump. We know that you do more reps, right? You're gonna create more fatigue, more you're gonna do
I think it's arguable.
more muscle damage. You think it's arguable in what aspects?
Fatigue, it's not always like more reps is more fatigue. Like, you know how fatiguing, like for your central nervous system, it is to do a 1 rep max or 3 rep max. Like that's pretty fatiguing. I think it depends on a lot of things, on your execution of the actual movement, how much it's affecting the local muscle versus other muscles in your whole central nervous system. Um, so it's like it's not cause and effect of the more reps you do, the more fatigue you get. But I would say in terms of tax on your body and on your joints, doing more volume, so more sets also, not more reps though. I'd say more sets could be more taxing, but then on the other hand, it's like, okay, if you're going really heavy though, then that might be even more taxing on your joints. Um, so, maybe doing higher reps might be more beneficial. But in my opinion, the main con of the pump is if you get too much of a pump, which I've only ever noticed being enhanced, getting too much of a pump to where I can't work out, for another 20 minutes. Like I just have to let the blood like get out of that muscle. Like uh on legs, for example, my lower back sometimes, depending on what movement I'm doing, depending on what I ate that day, my
What
lower
drugs you're
back can
on?
get what drugs I'm on, my lower back can get so pumped, and that takes away from the rest of the workout. Or also like there's been times where like I'd be trying a new lateral raise variation, and I'm like just trying it, really trying to feel my side delts, but I'm just feeling it also in my traps as well. And then I'm just walking around, or even like doing like I did this warm up one time. I did ITYWs, and I did like 2 or 3 sets of it, and I had the gnarliest fucking pump in my traps, rhomboids, rotator cuffs, all that, to where I had to sit down for 10 minutes because I couldn't start my shoulder workout. And so sometimes like traps will get too pumped or things like that, to where that takes away from the workout. So that's I think the biggest con of getting too much of a pump. But then I think a second one, especially more for naturals, would be if you hyper focus on it. If you hyper focus, no, this is just for everyone, natural or enhanced. Um, to where if you think the pump is golden and that's the thing that builds muscle, then you might be taking away from the actual meat and potatoes, which
Hmm.
is the actual, heavy training, the controlled eccentrics, the full stretch with heavy load, progressive overload. That is what builds muscle. And then the pump can maybe assist the recovery aspect on top of that. But just doing the pump, like you can get a pump by squeezing your muscle as an isometric contraction, but that's not going to build any muscle.
Hmm.
So I think if someone hyper focuses on the pump, then that can be, a negative of it as well.
Yeah, you don't want to specifically just chase the pump, right? Because that inherently on its own is not going to get you very far. If you're I mean, you're a beginner, you fucking respond to anything. But there's aspect of if you're taking too short of rest times, and you have a massive pump, it will reduce the amount of force you're able to produce. It's going to ultimately negatively impact the next set, right? I think we've all had a crazy chest pump or bicep pump, whatever it is, and you try to do the next set without adequate rest, and you are just substantially weaker. You're going to get much less out of those following sets.
Yeah. Um, and like even with arms, where like I'd say on arms, like obviously like I still train heavy, but I also go for a pump. But I'd say I train for more of a pump. I'd say like a higher ratio of my sets are higher reps on my arm days, just because if I'm doing too much lower rep work with heavier weight, that puts too much stress on my tendons, like my bicep tendon and everything. So, uh, for arms, I'll go a little bit higher reps, but then there can also become a point where my arms get too pumped, and then I have to wait until I do my next set just because I'm too pumped now.
Yeah.
So that can also, take away from it as well, to where if you did, lower rep sets and didn't get a crazy pump, uh, you can still take, a good rest time, but on arms, you don't really need to take too long for your central nervous system to recover. So, you
Hmm.
know, the pump isn't everything. It's not always perfect. It's nothing like there's nothing, not like there's nothing wrong with it, but
No, I think if you're not getting a pump, that's probably a sign of something
that's bad.
bad. Unless,
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, if you're cutting, you're depleted. You don't really expect to get that much of a pump. You should still get a pump to
You
some
should still
extent,
get,
but it'll go
yeah, you
away quick.
should.
It won't be crazy. Like I
Yeah.
remember when I would get pumps during prep. They'd be pretty crazy, but by the time you try to take a picture after, it's just gone. The window of opportunity is so fucking small.
Yeah. The pump really just becomes from sodium, not from carbs at that point.
Yeah, pretty much. And then how do you think there's I know you said doing a like getting a pump going in your workout. I do agree getting warm and getting somewhat of a pump going in workout is definitely beneficial, making sure all the muscles are firing. But I feel like if you were to focus on getting a pump straight off the bat in the beginning, do you think that would have negative aspects rather than focusing on going like the heavier lower rep ranges first, then moving into more higher rep range, more pump work towards the end of the workout?
Yeah, I think it depends. So like I like doing hamstring curls before I do my squatting movements. So I like
Mm-hmm.
getting a pump just in my whole leg, but I don't think that takes away from my squatting movements. Versus if I did, 3 sets to failure with the intensifier on a cable fly and then I went into my dumbbell flat pressing, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
my pressing is going to take a hit. Uh so, I think there's a time to use, getting a pump first in the workout, where whether it's just even just 1 set or maybe like, 2 sets where one is to failure. Not going too hard to where it takes away from your working sets of the heavier movements on your, your second movement. Um, but I do think if let's say if your bench is too strong to where either it causes joint pain or you don't feel it in the right muscle, you don't feel it that much in your chest. Like after I do a heavy set of dumbbell press, I'll feel it in my chest. Like I'll feel like, okay, I'm getting a good pump. Even if it was a set of like 6 or even 8 reps, um, I'm gonna feel it in my chest after the movement. I'm gonna feel it like on the stretch. I'm not always gonna feel it on the contraction. Sometimes I will, depending on the weight. But you should feel like you just did something to your chest. And if you aren't feeling it in your chest, or your chest isn't growing, your chest isn't getting sore, um, then you might want to pull back on the weight. And I think getting a pump before doing it could help with establishing that mind muscle connection and making it to where you don't need as heavy of weight to still go to failure. even though the ego takes a hit. But I think that's another use for it.
Yeah, it's a good point about using different rep ranges. A lot of people think that, rep ranges are kind of like standard across the board. We see this a lot where everybody thinks, why would you do more than 4 to 6 reps for anything when you can get the same effect with less fatigue, right? Less fatigue, same results, just go heavier. It's obviously easier to judge failure with heavier loads, right? Than, higher rep ranges. I think
I think that
for
also depends. It
I think it
depends.
depends on your level of experience, really.
Exactly. Yeah.
That's what that comes down to. I think any beginner is going to find failure easier with a lower rep range than a higher, just due to their judgment calls, level of effort, and what they perceive as failure versus metabolic stress and lactate buildup.
Yeah.
But then, like I say, the different exercises are better suited for different rep ranges, right? Like, I don't understand how anybody's going to go do a set of dumbbell ladder raises for 4 to 6 reps. Like, I just don't
Right.
even see that. And then you also can't compare yourself to somebody else. Everybody is not as resilient as others, right? I might be able to do a heavy set for 4 to 6 reps on bench press and grow off that and be fine and have no pain. Somebody else, like, their shoulders just might not be as resilient, and every time they try to do something like that, something fucking goes wrong. Perfect form, perfect execution, no matter what it is, they are just not as resilient. Their knees could be not as resilient to go heavy on squats, and just because they see somebody else do it, it's like, oh, that's effective. It's like, it might not be the way for you to do it effectively.
100%. I agree. And I think that when I see people post like it doesn't matter what rep range you do, like you can do, 4 sets on a heavy compound movement, and that's totally fine for everyone. Where it's like if I did that, that's gonna put way more stress on my joints compared to if I just brought the rep range up a little bit. Instead of 4, I'm doing 8 or 10. But also kind of going back to what you were saying about being able to gauge failure with higher versus lower reps. I think there's like a sweet spot, I'd say, of let's say, 8 to 12 reps where, it's pretty easy to gauge failure around that range. If you go a little bit lower than that, each rep is such a larger percentage of the set. So in a 5 rep set, each rep is 20% of that set, where doing one extra rep is so much effort. Where let's say, you're going from 4 reps to 5 reps, that's a whole what, 20, 25% of the set you just did, to where you might not do that one extra rep. That's just one rep.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's leaving one rep in the tank, but that's leaving, that's only doing 80% of the actual amount that you could have done if you had a little extra spot or a little extra effort or whatever it is, doing only 4 reps instead of 5 reps when 5 reps was failure. There's only one rep in the tank, right? But if you had a set of 15 or a set of 20 and you did one rep left in the tank, you were a lot closer to failure in terms of the percentage closer to failure. Now, if you got 19 out of 20 reps, that's 95% of the way to failure versus 80% doing 4 out of 5 reps, even though both one is one RIR. So
Mm-hmm.
that's why I like doing a little bit higher reps, not 30 rep sets, because then once you get to a certain point where you're doing over 20 reps, over 30 reps, over 40 reps, you can, you have all these other variables, you have cardiovascular fatigue, you just get bored, all these things where it's like, all right, not actually going to get close to failure just because it's too light. So I think it's too heavy, or if it's too light, you're not going to be able to get as close to failure as if it's just a good weight, like a moderate weight where it's heavy enough where you can actually go to failure in, let's say, the 5 to 20 rep range, something like that. Obviously depending on the person's experience level. I don't think a beginner should be doing a set of 30 because they aren't actually going to be able to reach failure if it's that light.
Mm-hmm.
They're just doing reps. They're just
Yeah.
going to start moving ways, start doing whatever, just getting the reps in, not actually focus on the actual muscle they're moving. Um, that's why I think they should be doing lower reps as a beginner, like 5 to 10, 5 to 12. Um, but that's my reasoning on why I kind of like doing around like 8 to 12-ish reps, just because I can get closer to failure with that level of weight
Yeah, I think it's just
myself.
universally the sweet spot in every aspect, right? Is, judging failure, being able to go to actual failure, injury, prevention, not dealing with a ton of metabolic stress, lactic acid buildup. It's a
Yeah.
good range. But
Yeah.
I don't know. I think beginners going heavy is also there's like danger to that as well because
Definitely,
their
definitely.
form is not going to be that great. And obviously, the heavier loads they're using, there's just inherently going to be more risk for something to go wrong.
Right. I'm saying more like assuming that they have good form, or assuming they have a
Mm-hmm.
trainer or someone watching their form, or they're learning how to do it. They're going to get more benefit, assuming they can have good form and not hurt themselves, doing, you know, 6 to 10, 6 to 12, something like that reps, and really focusing on their effort. I think that's really what beginners need to learn how to do, is to learn how to train hard, but also learn how to use the right muscles, learn how to have good form. And, I think their execution is very important. It's not the only important thing. This isn't yoga. You're not going to be just doing like slow movements with 2 pound dumbbells. Like you have to
Mm-hmm.
learn how to train hard as a beginner, but it's not just about effort. You could be just, doing a bunch of random bullshit and not really doing anything to build muscle and just exerting effort.
Mm-hmm. No,
Like, who
it's
wouldn't?
a learning process for sure. Learning how to train with actual effort. I take M through her workouts right now, and before she was doing a bunch of higher volume. And she obviously saw results from that, but anytime I would watch her work out, I'm like, it's just not training hard. Like there's like you're not anywhere near failure. So, I changed her program and we have her, squatting heavy, sumo deadlifting heavy, doing heavy hip thrusts, 4 to 6 reps. Once you surpass 8 reps, we're gonna do, increased load from there. Some lighter rep range, higher rep range work on other movements like kickbacks and stuff. But you could just see like the level of exhaustion and how much more fucking shot she is after, a set of just, 4 to 5 reps on a hip thrust going to actual failure. And actually, the huge part of it is also me being there to scream at her
Yeah,
and push
yeah,
her because a huge part of it is fucking adrenaline. Like if I wasn't there for
definitely.
most of those sessions, she wouldn't even be able to do it. Versus like the higher repping trick, which is like on paper, objectively looks like it should be much harder, much more effort. But because of it being this split where it's like 4 sets of 15 to 20 reps and this and that,
Right.
it's like she's not pushing that hard, and her judgment calls of what is sufficient enough load to actually hit heavy enough weight for failure in that is just completely skewed. So obviously going to lower rep ranges and pushing in that aspect has been a lot better. But then a huge part of that also is when you're using low, like I just said, when you're using lower rep ranges like that, um, obviously adrenaline is huge no matter how you train, but I feel like it plays a bigger factor when you're doing things that heavy because we've sat there and I've done this myself. I'm sure you've done this, but I've sat there with her and it's like goes to pick up the bar, doesn't move. Okay, wait 3 minutes. And now I'm like, I'll like fucking literally start screaming and get in your fucking head, lock in, and then automatically now it goes up for 6 reps, just screaming like balls to the wall. But what changed from the first set where it couldn't even move versus that? And then if you don't have that mentality going in every time you go to the gym, it's like just based off of the way you feel, you might be like your progressive overload just it might be entirely skewed. It might not be moving in a fashion that should just based off of the amount of adrenaline and how you feel going into those heavier sets.
Yeah, that's a very important thing, is having adrenaline. Obviously, you don't need to always rely on the most amount of adrenaline as possible, because then that's not really sustainable for long-term, progressive overload. But you do need to have adrenaline. One reason that I can kind of tie two things together is when people say that the way to build muscle is from mechanical tension. What is mechanical tension? It's the use of as many muscle fibers at once and using them to their full capacity. And what allows that to happen? It's the nerves that innervate those muscle fibers. And there's different size nerves that innervate different amounts of muscle fibers. So you can have, let's say, like, in order to move my fingers like this, these are very small nerves that only innervate a few muscle fibers in order to have that precision. Or even like my eyeball, those muscles are very like precise, versus the nerves that innervate the muscle fibers in my quads. Those are big nerves, or motor neurons specifically, that innervate large amounts of muscle fibers to have large amounts of force. These motor neurons take a lot of energy, and a lot of, one thing I'm going to tie this to, a lot of adrenaline, and other neurotransmitters, norepinephrine, to be able to turn on and to be able to actually activate all these muscle fibers. And we don't want to always be doing that. We don't want to always be using the amount of force in your quads is required to squat 405 just to be able to walk around every day. Like if you did that, you'd be so fatigued just walking around for 10 seconds. So what I'm saying is the way to activate these large motor neurons that innervate large amounts of muscle fibers is with adrenaline. And so the way you get adrenaline, you know, it's the mental aspect that turns those on, but also the physical aspect of using heavy loads. So using those heavy loads requires those amount of muscle fibers and taking that to failure. That's why training to failure is important, not just doing, a heavy weight that you could do for 5 reps, doing it for 1 rep, that's still heavy, but getting to failure allows all those muscle fibers to turn on. So what I'm saying is if you're not using adrenaline, you're not going to be able to use those muscle fibers. You're not going to be able to build as much muscle. Think about it like this also. When you first wake up in the morning and you're asleep, how hard can you grip your fist? Not as hard as if you're mid-workout because your central nervous system, your peripheral nervous system, they're not turned on as much. You don't have as much of these neurotransmitters and neuromodulators that increase the sensitivity of these motor neurons so that they can respond to this adrenaline and norepinephrine a lot more effectively to be able to turn on these muscle fibers. And so what I'm saying is that makes sense is getting that level of adrenaline with the heavy loads is required in order to actually train effectively, versus doing like lightweight for 30 reps as a beginner and they're just bored and they're just moving weight, or even just like, more commonly doing 4 sets of 12 to 15 where you don't go to failure in any of your sets. You're not going to be able to actually use all the muscle fibers that you could be using and causing as much mechanical tension as you could be using, and therefore not building as much muscle as you could be building.
Mm-hmm. I think the general point here is that you can optimize how you approach the workout. You can increase adrenaline rather than just getting under the bar, because your adrenaline will obviously increase. You get on the bar over higher weight, like there's gonna be fucking adrenaline, but potentiating, properly warming up, getting blood flow, getting into the right mental state, it plays a huge factor. Staying off your phone. I think everybody knows. If you don't know this, you've never fucking trained hard. If you're sitting there like you're recording your workouts on a tripod, that always takes away from the workout. I don't think there's ever a situation where it doesn't take away from the workout. And I don't see how anybody could possibly say that it doesn't unless they've never actually experienced training hard and being locked in. Like when you're sitting there and you're just tapped in mentally and you have that focus, you're properly warmed up, there is just a huge difference in what you'll get out of your sets, the amount of effort that you'll put in. And you go into wherever, like in high school, when you're in a fucking weight room and everybody's all hype, like that has a huge effect on what you're able to get out of the session. So, obviously keep that in mind if you are doing heavier. It applies for no matter what rep ranges, but I think heavier loads specifically because it's like that initial takeoff is just so much more, requires so much more out of you that boost, that fucking locked in mentality can make a significant difference in how much you actually get out of those lower rep ranges and how far you're actually able to take it to failure, because people will just stop short of failure with those heavier ranges because it's just fucking hard from the bottom to pull or to push from the bottom of a press, and you really need to have that boost of adrenaline.
100%.
100%. Okay.
Yeah.
So we already talked about insulin sensitivity, how it affects the pumps. What would take away from a pump other than obviously depletion, being in a low caloric state, other than obviously improper execution. There's things like caffeine. Like you see people drink just black coffee going into a workout, and caffeine's a vasoconstrictor, right? So I don't think people understand that like pre-workout formulas are designed to have these ratios of stimulants to other things to cause vasodilation so that you're able to get a pump and that's not negatively impaired, rather than just drinking a fucking Red Bull before you go into train and then maybe not being even properly hydrated as well.
Yeah, that's what you just said right there is hydration. That's a lot of people, they don't realize that if they're not fully hydrated, they're not going to get that good of a pump, because what is a pump, it's blood going into the muscle, but what's the liquid component of blood? It's mostly water.
Mm.
So, if you're not drinking enough water, you're not going to have as much volume in your blood, and you're not going to be able to push as much blood volume into the muscle, not get as good of a pump. So hydration is a huge one. Um,
Electrolytes.
Electrolytes, especially sodium, to allow for that, water and blood to come into the cells, well, specifically water, and help get them into the veins, help with transport of blood. Um, Another one is sodium also uh, activates neurons or turns neurons on, so that you can have faster neuron signaling from sodium and sodium channels. So that's one thing people don't realize is sodium not only does it improve your pump, but it also improves your performance. So that's why I
Hmm.
always put a little bit of pink salt, or any kind of salt or electrolyte powder in my pre-workout. Yeah, you said caffeine. I still get a good pump taking caffeine, but it's like if you take too much, if you're taking over 400, 500 milligrams of caffeine, that definitely is going to cause some vasoconstriction. And why would you want to do that when you're trying to get a pump? I'd say things that decrease insulin sensitivity. So like sleep. If you didn't get that good of sleep last night, the night before you went to the gym or wanted to have a good workout, that's going to affect your pump, but also going to affect your ability to train. And the way you train is how you get a pump. So if you didn't get that good of sleep, your nervous system isn't going to be as firing as fast. You're not going to be able to squeeze the muscles as hard or have as much neural activation of the muscle fibers, and you're not going to be able to train as hard, not going to be as strong, not going to get as good of a pump from not getting good sleep. Stress also plays a role. Um, Using the right muscles, I think is what you said. I think that's it. I don't know what
Okay.
else.
And then as far as, pre-workout pump products, um, what are the main, would you say the main ingredients you look for? What are the most important ones? I would say, citrulline, glycerol, beta alanine. What else would you add to that?
Um, Beta-alanine, I guess, is kind of like a secondhand mechanism for the pump. It's not going to directly cause the pump, but it can help you train for more reps, which can help you get a better pump
Reduces
because it
fatigue.
buffers lactic acid.
Yeah.
And so if you're not getting as much lactic acid, you can train for higher reps, get a better pump. But yeah, citrulline, malate, glycerol, agmatine sulfate, arginine, um,
Arginine is the
salt.
precursor to citrulline, or citrulline is the precursor to arginine.
It's one of them. I think it goes both ways, but I think citrulline is the precursor to arginine. I'm pretty sure, right?
I'm still confused onto why they're always both in pre-workouts if one's a precursor to the other.
They want to make money.
You don't
Marketing.
you don't know either. It doesn't really make sense to me. I don't know. Maybe I'm missing something here.
It's another ingredient that can cause a pump, but I guess people just don't know that one converts into the other. And so uh I think it's just because people like the company wants to put, hey, we also have this pump product and this pump product. So we got extra pump products, even though it's the same thing.
Yeah,
So who
maybe.
knows, maybe one of them, goes down a different pathway. Also, like maybe citrulline converts into arginine, but then it also converts into something else. And then you're getting, you know, but then also it's just like, I don't know, maybe it's on the ratios. I don't know exactly that. Um, but I'd say salt and water and carbs. Those are the three main best pump ingredients. Salt, water, and carbs.
What about potassium?
I guess. Um, it can help. I've never noticed that good of a pump from using potassium. It also pulls water out of the cells, not pulls water into the cells. Um, so I mean, some people say potassium gives them a good pump. Maybe it's like the initial influx of water, but then
I would say
uh
if you don't have the right ratios, if you're like deficient in
yeah,
potassium, maybe. It is a precursor. Arginine, citrulline is the precursor to arginine.
yeah. So then I
Okay.
don't know. I don't
Yeah,
know why they put arginine in.
arginine flux to the liver is modulated by the intestine, which can convert dietary arginine to citrulline. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. It's interesting. I have to ask somebody that formulates
Yeah.
pre-workouts.
Yeah. I'm not too knowledgeable on, citrulline and arginine. I'm more knowledgeable on the Cialis.
Cialis. You know anything
Mhm.
about glycerol?
Yeah, Well, I mean, glycerol itself is the backbone of triglycerides. I know that. But yeah, when people take glycerol, uh, they, it helps pull water into the muscle. It causes more. It has something to do with water retention.
Which is why it needs to
Uh,
be taken with water.
yeah, yeah, definitely. Same with creatine, but creatine doesn't act as fast. Creatine is, more of like a long-term supplement to help also pull more water into the muscle. But glycerol, yeah, you take it, it's gonna pull more water into the muscle. Um, I mean, I noticed it, but for me, it's like I can get a really good pump without,
Any of
spending,
this.
yeah, really, just salt, water, and carbs. Like that's the main, and training also, training properly. That's really all you really need just for a pump. And then there's like little things on top of it, like, if you get things for cheap or you get things for free, that's like might as well take them if they can help with the pump a little bit more. Um, but like glycerol, I don't think glycerol is that cheap though. So that's why I never like I took it for a period of time, but it's like I'd rather just, take other things for the pump. It's not doing that much for me that I'm not getting from other supplements or,
Yeah.
just from salt.
Well, it's included in a lot of formulas already in pre-workouts. Sometimes you have to add it in
Yeah.
separately. Okay. Now let's talk about Tadalafil, Cialis, the main one, the controversial one.
Yeah. Well,
So
there's a lot to talk about.
I have taken Cialis many, many, many times. I've
Yep.
never noticed any substantial difference in the pump that I get in a workout. It obviously works for its intended purposes, in the bedroom. I've never
Yep.
had it not work for that, and it obviously lasts fucking a long time. But
Yep.
it's never worked for me in the gym, and it's always been this big hype like Cialis is the best thing you take for a pump. And I've known other guys who have had the same thing, but then there's other guys who say that it makes a huge difference. And I have concluded that um I think it can make a difference for some people. I think there's genetic variants, but I also think there's a huge placebo aspect to that as well because of just how trendy it is and how much everybody thinks it's actually doing. And what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I think it does depend on the person. We did some research on this yesterday, but uh, the way that it works is it inhibits this enzyme PDE5.
Mm-hmm.
And it's hard to find online exactly the answers to this. It's studied, but it's not fully studied. There's so many things in the human body that aren't fully understood yet. But from what we found is, it's this enzyme is mostly found in just certain tissues in the body. However, it is found in all tissues in the body in some amounts. It's just it's more found, in the corpus cavernosum, so in the Johnson. It's more found in
The
the
Johnson.
lungs, more found in the lungs, the brain, um, kidney, and then there's different, PDEs, phosphodiesterase enzymes, like PDE1, 2, 3, 10, that are found in large concentrations in other parts of the body, like in the retina of the eye, things like that. And so with PDE5, the one that tadalafil inhibits, um, it is found in smooth muscle, and so that's in the vasculature walls all over your body. It just depends on how much, and that is what I think is the genetic variant of why people respond differently to tadalafil in terms of the muscle pump. Everyone has a lot of PDE5 in the Johnson. But in terms of actually being able to produce that enzyme in whatever amounts, in skeletal muscle, in the veins and arteries that connect to those skeletal muscles, I think that is what uh, depends person to person. So for me personally, I have noticed a difference when I take Cialis or if I don't take Cialis. So the first time I ever took it, I took a video, I posted on TikTok, and it's like, yes, I get, and I didn't show that down there, but I do get a good pump regardless. So it's like, was I not able to get a pump before, and then I started taking Cialis, and then now I got a pump? No, obviously, I could still get a good pump, but I did notice that my pump was extra good that day, the first day that I took it. And, I took a video, it's deeper down on my TikTok, but, I showed my arms before I got a pump, and then I got a pump, and then I had crazy vascularity. It's like, obviously, even though I didn't take Cialis, like I'd still have, a good pump from it. But it's just more anecdotal that like I noticed a significant effect from taking it in terms of what my normal pump felt like. Um, but then on the other hand, it's like I've been taking Cialis consistently for, I don't know, 2 years probably,
Every day
and
or like every few
well,
days?
every training day.
You take it every
Uh,
training day.
yeah, it's just a part of my pre-workout. So if I'm not taking pre-workout, then I don't take Cialis.
Why do you take it every day if it lasts 72 hours?
Well, it's got a 36-hour half-life. So it still stays in your system, at a solid level. So same with like, testosterone esters. If something has 7-day half-life, you don't take it every 7 days.
Hmm.
Uh, and if you take it every day, for example, 7-day half-life, after a period of time taking, you're still going to reach peak concentration and have a sustained level. So it doesn't really matter the frequency that you take it. It just, if I'm taking it, let's say every day versus twice a week, the whole weekly dosage is going to be different, on the frequency, even though the amount that I take every single day is the same. So that's what matters in terms of how much is in my system. So for me, I'm not noticing any side effects. I'm not getting, like stuffy nose, watery eyes, things like that, which isn't as common with Cialis as it is with Viagra, or even like headaches or, dizziness, things like that. Um, I don't get any side effects from Cialis. I get really good pumps while I'm taking it. So there's the correlation there. But, there's also a lot of other variables that are playing into the reason why I'm getting a good pump. But then also the other benefit of it is like, I enjoy the obvious benefit of it. So it's like that's the time that I take it is just like as a form of my, systems that I have in place. I don't want to have to remember, okay, now I have to go and take my Cialis now. And, I take it in liquid form. I even have it right here, actually. Didn't realize I got some liquid form Cialis, research them, code Katz. Um, and I don't want to take it by mouth. You can, I've done it many times, but it kind of tastes like alcohol. And I'd rather just put it into my drink, my pre-workout that has EAAs and it's flavored. And I don't taste it. And I just drink it. And it's a mindless thing that I take, and now it's just in my system, at a pretty consistent level, uh, all the time. So it's like
Okay.
I could notice, a difference from it, or yeah.
Okay, let's backtrack here. So
Okay.
Cialis is, I feel like it became very popular over like the past year or two, just all over TikTok and everything. It's like all these kids found out about it and they think it's like revolutionary. But like you said, it's a PDE5 inhibitor. So, which is the enzyme. It's found in smooth muscle tissue, which is, blood vessels, your arteries, primarily like in
Stomach,
your what?
digestive
Yeah.
system, stomach, small intestines, all that.
Yeah. It's primarily in like your lungs and your meat stick, right? Is it's not present in muscle, skeletal muscle, or are you saying that it is to some extent?
In small amounts. So I,
Small
I found
amounts.
a study that said so there's different isoforms of PDE5. I think they're called PDE5 A1, A2, and A3.
Yep.
And two of those were found in small amounts in skeletal muscle. And then I think one or two of them found in the arteries that connect to skeletal muscle. So found in skeletal muscle and in the vascular walls of the arteries that connect and bring blood to the skeletal muscles. So it's there, but in terms of, the amount, like you're not gonna take it and just get a huge fucking pump and just fill up with blood in all of your muscles.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like maybe it's gonna help a little bit extra with the pump. Um, if it if it makes sense to the person, like if they want to take it for the other intended reason, and they're not noticing any side effects, it doesn't cost very much. Like Tadalafil is pretty fucking cheap. Yeah, it's cheap. So it's like might as well,
Mm-hmm.
if it's causing side effects, or if it is becoming, if someone thinks they're going to become dependent on it for, erectile dysfunction when they don't have that problem yet, which in my opinion, you're not going to just develop erectile dysfunction taking Tadalafil. That's more the psychological aspect that causes it. Um,
That's good. We should touch on that after.
okay. Um,
But
I think it makes perfectly fine. And another reason is even though it does help with, erectile dysfunction and, the performance in the, it's just like, I like being enhanced. I like taking steroids. Being fucking, superhuman jacked. And so it's like kind of, makes that aspect more enhanced also. It's like, why not, enhance that aspect as well? So that's the reason
mm-hmm.
why I like taking it for that reason also. But it's like, in the gym, it's like, if it's helping with the pump, cool. EAAs. It's like, are you really gonna get fucking jacked from taking EAAs? No. But is it gonna potentially help a little bit with recovery to any degree? Maybe. If
Hmm.
it's not costing very much money, and if you enjoy taking it, like for me, it flavors my pre-workout. So it's like I take it, might as well. If you're broke and you don't want to pay for it, then you don't have to take it.
Hmm.
Um, but it's
Yeah.
like small little pennies, here and there, they add up.
Yeah. So it works. It's primarily found in smooth muscle. There can be some extent in skeletal muscle based off of the one study you saw, right?
I think there was like two or three, but yeah,
Okay. And then it works. So it blocks PDE5, which breaks down to CGMP, and then that is essentially what allows the tissue to relax and enhance blood flow. Um,
kind of.
yes.
So let me explain it real quick. So you have um, GMP that converts into cyclic GMP, so CGMP,
Hmm.
and then that CGMP normally converts into 5 prime GMP. And so there's a couple enzymes in that process. The first process is guanylyl cyclase. That's an enzyme, but that doesn't matter right now. And then converting cGMP into 5 prime GMP. That's what we want to avoid. So GMP, or I mean cGMP, that decreases calcium. And normally when you think of contracting your muscle, you contract your bicep. The way to contract that bicep is from calcium dumping into the muscle cell. And so what calcium allows for that muscle contraction. So if you decrease calcium, then you can allow for that muscle to relax. And so PDE5, you can basically call the party pooper enzyme, because it converts the CGMP, which allows calcium to decrease, and that allows for smooth muscle relaxation. If you block that party pooper from converting CGMP into 5 prime GMP, then you have more CGMP floating around, causing more decrease in calcium, allowing for a longer smooth muscle relaxation, and that's why you're able to have a larger influx of blood for longer,
So you're able to have a boner for longer.
and a bigger one too.
Yeah. But it's primarily so the enzyme is primarily found in
The dick.
yeah, in your dick. It's primarily found in your dick, right? Everybody's going to have it largely in their dick, but then they can have it to some extent in other smooth muscle tissue throughout the body, some arteries, throughout fucking where your skeletal muscle is, all that stuff. But the extent of to how much they have is going to vary, as just it probably would in your dick for a lot of people. But I'm sure there's people that are much more hyper responsive to Cialis in terms of sexual performance than others, just like it is with training. So you could take somebody like me, maybe, or somebody who just doesn't respond that well to it in terms of training performance and getting more of a pump. It might just be that I just have less of that enzyme present throughout other areas of my body where another person might have more of it. So therefore, the effect that they get from it is more substantial. Whereas me, I'm basically able to get the same damn pump with or without it.
Right. Have you ever taken it when you were natural or off cycle?
Yeah, I don't remember. Maybe it's been such a long time.
Try it right now. I mean, are you training right now?
I mean, I'm on TRT. Not really. I mean, I take like
I mean,
100
that's
milligrams every like 10 days.
yeah. So you're basically natural. So try it right now. Just because if you take it, that's why like right now it's like I don't exactly notice the difference. Like if I take Anavar, like I notice the difference. But like right now, because I'm already getting good pumps, it's like, I mean, I don't need it for pumps. But if I was natural, if I was off cycle, that'd be a good experiment to run, is just like you don't have it at all in your system. Try taking it for a few days to get it saturated in your system and see if your pumps improve. Keeping all the other variables controlled, diet, sleep, all that, and just see if it improves your vascularity.
Mm. I think that's also a good point though, because right now I'm barely training. I train like 2 to 3 times a week. I'm not dieting at all. I eat like shit. I eat like 3 to 4 meals a day. There's still good food in there, but still. So I think obviously the average person does not live a bodybuilder lifestyle. Like the majority of the people in this fitness community do not actually live the full bodybuilding lifestyle. Most of them still have shitty diets. What happened? Your light went out?
My light fell out. Yeah.
Oh shit. Yeah, most of them still have shitty diets. They really don't train that hard to begin with. Like if you look at the majority of people in this industry, they are doing things at a very mediocre rate. That's just the reality. So now I think a lot of those people get introduced to this Tadalafil, this super pump drug, and they see it and they take it, and maybe it makes a bigger difference to them again, just due to genetic variants, but also because they don't have all those other aspects of training, diet, hydration, sleep locked in. So the effect that they see from this is substantially bigger compared to when you're locked in and your training's on point, your hydration's on point, you are again already on PEDs too. Let's add that in there. You have all these other aspects in place. You're taking pre-workout, you're putting yourself in a position to already have the best pump you could possibly get. You know, you're going to get a great pump. Now you add Tadalafil into the mix, it's on again, unless there's like genetic variants there, it's probably not going to make any substantial difference unless again, the genetic variants thing. But then I think the people that don't have those things into place, it's kind of like this band-aid where they see, oh my God, like this is what creates the pump. When really, if they just fixed all the other aspects of their approach to bodybuilding, they would probably be able to get the same result, if not pretty damn close.
Yeah, it's really not like the miracle drug for the getting a pump. If you don't have your shit in line, if you don't have, a good diet, you're not drinking enough water, you're not getting good sleep, you don't know how to train properly for a pump or anything like that, or use the right muscles that you're trying to train, you're not going to see a crazy benefit from it. I mean, of course, drugs work, but like it's the same with EAs. With like, if you're taking EAs but you're not eating enough protein, it's not really doing much. Like EAs are not the magic trick. It's you got to focus on the meat and potatoes. You got to be getting enough protein in the whole day, then having some EAs on top of that, or at least with enough protein in the whole day. It might help a little bit just because of the timing that you're having it. During the workout, while you're like pushing blood and insulin into the muscles. Having that flush of or increase in amino acids also might help. That's why I take EAs. But with Cialis, it's like if you're not getting a pump because of all the other reasons, focus on the other reasons first, and then you can take Cialis. And I think another benefit, even if you are enhanced, especially if you're enhanced, is the health benefit of it decreasing blood pressure. So it's not, the most effective blood pressure drug. It was originally created to be a blood pressure drug, um, but it's not as strong as like, an ARB like Telmisartan.
Mm-hmm.
But it does decrease blood pressure, and that's a side effect of it. Is if you take too much, it can decrease your blood pressure too much. So I think being on PEDs, it's beneficial to take Cialis regardless, just because it can help with your blood pressure. Um, obviously, you know, in addition to Telmisartan, healthy diet, cardio, things like that, but body fat levels. But that's another reason why I take it, is just for help with my blood pressure, even though I also take Telmisartan too.
Yeah, but no, I was saying that the people who don't have that shit locked in, because you're saying they're not, I'm saying that those people who don't have their training, nutrition, all that stuff locked in, that they see when they take Cialis, they see a bigger difference
Yeah.
because they are already at a disadvantage for the pump that they should be getting. So this like basically is this band-aid mechanism that exposes them to like, oh, I get this crazy pump now, when if they just had the other shit locked into place, it wouldn't be any substantial difference.
I don't know if it would not make a difference, but I
Not
do
make a
think,
difference, but they think it's so much bigger than it is just because they don't have the other shit in place. So now they take this
yeah,
drug and they get a pump, but they don't realize if they were drinking enough water, getting electrolytes and had their training on point, execution on point, nutrition on point, they were, loading enough glycogen, that they would be able to achieve the same results, if not close to those results.
the pump would be way better too. And yeah, better results as well. So it's
But
like it is a little bit of a band-aid for those types of people. Um, and it's gonna improve vascularity most likely. Um,
I think that's why it's so overhyped, is because obviously everything in this industry is, the majority of the people, like I said, they're not people who actually live the lifestyle. They're kind of people who want to feel like they live the lifestyle online, but are not dedicating their lives to all the other aspects. They're taking like, they're always looking for the easy way out. And, those are the people that are very prevalent in this industry, or bigger influencers, and they find out about it, they start pushing it. Now it becomes this very hyped thing.
so you're saying that Cialis works for the pump.
I'm saying it might for some people. I don't know. I'll take it the next time I go train because, like I said, I haven't been doing shit. See if there's a difference. I think, for one, the genetic variance thing. I think I probably have less of that expression of that enzyme, and then I also think it's just like I've always had everything else locked in place too. So take that into effect with that stuff. It's like I was already at the best position possible to get a great pump as it is. So it's like even if it made a difference to me, it was never really anything I noticed. It's like I get this pump, I get a great fucking pump with or without it. Like I'm getting a my chest is gonna look this full after chest day no matter what.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you're gonna get a good pump regardless, but I do think that increases vascularity a little bit, like, in your arms or, wherever, forearms, biceps. Even if like you got a pump and then you go out, I've noticed it those times also where like I remember this one time I was off cycle and I wanted to have a really good pump. I was going out that night and I went to the gym, I trained something upper body, but I took Cialis before it. And then that night I was like, damn, I'm fucking vascular. This shit works.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
It's also funny because you're saying that I know you take like what 5 milligrams.
10.
You take 10. Yeah. See, every time I've taken it, I've taken 10, but I've usually take 20. I just take the full tab. I'll take 20. And if that's not doing it, it's like there has to be a less responsive aspect to it. Again, it'll work for its intended purposes, but it's not like I go walk to the gym and get this fucking nasty pump. And then as far as blood pressure goes, I don't know about the blood pressure because I've never taken it consistently like that. I think you would have to take it consistently to see the effect on blood pressure. But I had high blood pressure through the times I took it, no matter what. The only thing I lowered my blood pressure was Telmisartan.
Yeah, it's yeah. The reason why Cialis isn't going to be as effective as Telmisartan is just because Cialis is just going to allow the veins to relax a little bit more, and so they're
Mm-hmm.
going to open up a little bit more. So that can decrease blood pressure a little bit, but taking Telmisartan is going to decrease total water in your body in terms of like how much water is in your veins and in your arteries. So, and the way that works is just because of the RAS system. So if you're decreasing sodium retention, you're going to decrease water retention. You're going to, not going to hold on to as much water by taking that angiotensin receptor blocker, blocking angiotensin from retaining that water. So, uh, that's why Telmisartan is a much more effective blood pressure medication. That's why it's prescribed a lot more often versus Cialis isn't really prescribed for blood pressure.
I never
Um,
see them prescribe telmisartan really. I always see them prescribe
like,
lisinopril. Is that what it is? Lisinopril?
yeah, and like losartan and valsartan.
When they're
Um,
less, I've seen them because I've had multiple clients come to me on a lisinopril and it not be as effective, and I'll tell them switch to telmisartan, and they'll instantly like their blood pressure will drop.
yeah, and I
So I
like
wonder
Telmisartan
why.
because it's I don't know. I don't know. My dad takes one of them. I think he takes Valsartan or something. I don't know, but I don't know why doctors prescribe other ARBs. I would
Telmisartan
guess that's
also has the potential for metabolic regulation too. It also has other benefits, and it's not as common to have side effects.
yeah. So I'd say the reason why just blood pressure medications, and there's lots of blood pressure medications. So there's all the different ARBs. There's ACE inhibitors. There's renin inhibitors. There's beta blockers. Um, Another one I'm forgetting, but uh, the reason why all these different medications that all have the same goal uh, are differently prescribed is generally because different people tolerate it differently. So some people are going to respond better to one drug over the other. And that could definitely be based on genetics. Um, but yeah, as you were saying, Telmisartan for bodybuilding also has that benefit of I think it plays a part in the PPAR pathway, which has to do with fat loss. I think like beta oxidation or something. That's a little fuzzy, but uh, that's it's not going to cause fat loss, but it can help in some capacity, I think. So that's the other side benefit of Telmisartan, but really it's just I'm pretty sure it's a stronger blood pressure medication compared to most other ones, and it's easy to take. It's just 24-hour half-life, so you just take it once a day, and it works really well. Um, but yeah, we were gonna talk about
I don't know why they. I just don't know why they prescribe the other ones so much. Like I never see them prescribe telmisartan.
well, it could be it's cheaper for the doctor, and that
Money.
that's
It's all about
why
money, probably.
like TRT clinics they prescribe 8X instead of Aromasin because it's a lot cheaper,
Mm-hmm.
and it's dumber because why like I have a fucking bone to pick with fucking TRT clinics and HRT clinics because like they're a fucking scam.
Scammers,
And yeah, I know.
scammers,
It's like,
scammers.
so I got my dad on TRT, and I would say I know about TRT and the basics of health on it. Um, he doesn't listen to me because I'm not a fucking doctor, and he listens to the doctor when I'm always telling him, let me talk to your fucking doctor because I would love to have a conversation with them. Why they don't even measure anything besides his total testosterone, free testosterone, and estradiol. They don't measure his HDL. They don't measure his LDL. They don't measure anything that has to do with his actual health. It's literally just a service that they're providing in order to improve his testosterone levels, regardless of his health. So a huge reason why it's a fucking scam is because they're just trying to make the client happy. So, one part of it is fine. They prescribe HCG. That's fine. You don't have to take it, but, they don't want their clients complaining that their balls are streaking. So I get that. Sure. From a business perspective. And also, the beneficial effects on neurosteroids. So HCG can be fine, but why is every single person, and I've actually talked to a gynecologist about this specifically that also prescribes TRT. And I said, do you prescribe different drugs depending on the person, or do you give every client the same three drugs: testosterone, Arimidex, and HCG?
It's the same three. It's a pack.
We give every single client those three things. What if they're lean and they don't aromatize very much? Are you still taking 8X? Or what if they're old and have 25 HDL? And like, why are they taking Arimidex? And so I obviously you want your estradiol to be as high as possible without side effects. The beneficial effects on your health. It's going to improve your HDL. It's going to improve cognition, and it's neuroprotective, and it's protective for all of your organs. So why would you want to decrease your estradiol just to be in the reference range of like 7 to 42 when reference ranges also change depending on what clinic you ask, what doctor you ask. Why wouldn't you want your estradiol to be higher, like 60, and your testosterone to be like 6, 7, 800, when that will be healthier? That'll improve your other lab markers, which are what actually matter. And if you can have higher estradiol levels without having any sort of nipple sensitivity or bloating or emotions or anything like that, acne, why not do that? It's because the TRT clinics want the customer to be happy, and they want them to not have any sort of side effects and to be in the reference range that they're measuring. And then they use Arimidex instead of Aromasin, even though Arimidex is more negatively effective or more negatively harmful on HDL production compared to Aromasin is not as impactful on HDL. So they're picking the cheaper drug that's more unhealthy and also it controls estradiol even more, to accomplish one goal that they don't even need to accomplish. And that's why it's a scam. And that's why it's not, meant for their health. It's meant for the service that they're buying, which is testosterone and estradiol levels.
Every fucking doctor is a scam. That's a controversial statement. It's a hot take. Hot take. All doctors are scammers. It's not. It's just the reality is that it's very hard to find a doctor who's actually, concerned about your overall well-being and actually knows what they're talking about, especially when it comes to things outside of their specific practice. And even when they are, like, like I said, you go to TRT clinics, you talk to endocrinologists, and they're fucking telling people to inject once a week, once every other week. It's fucking crazy what you see these people prescribe them and what they tell them to do, and they just disregard everything else and like don't care and don't have an answer for things. And when you question them about things, they don't have an answer either. This is the reference range, this is what's healthy. It's like, oh, that's not really how it works. It's not that black and white. Just because these fucking numbers say once you're high, it's a bad thing. It's not inherently bad. But then guys go to their general, like, what is it, your primary care doctor, and I really like hate to say this, but those guys never know anything about, at least about bodybuilding and what we do, and about reading the markers and how it correlates to the drugs we're using, all these things. I had a guy fucking that was literally, this is not that long ago, he's type 2 diabetic. He 100% has type 2 diabetes. He has genetics for it. He's literally in a deficit. As he gets lower, his A1C gets higher. It's abnormally high. His insulin production is very low, and the doctor's like, dude, completely disregard it. You're not type 2 because you're not technically in the range. But everything, if you look at it, every sign points to the fact that if this guy eats anything over fucking 2,500 calories, he's gonna shoot up and become type 2. So he's like, you don't need metformin, you don't need berberine, you don't need anything. Like, it's a bad idea. Just fucking keep dieting, keep eating 1,500 calories for the rest of your life. It's like what the fuck are you talking about? All the signs are there. You would think these people know these things, and just people listen to them just because they have the title of a doctor, right? There's a doctor. These other people who do this for a living don't know more than the guy who got a degree and didn't actually study any of this stuff and doesn't actually, have any expertise in this specific field. Maybe when it comes to what to do when you get a cold and what to prescribe for the cold, but that's not what we're talking about here. It's crazy. So many people appeal to the authority when it comes to that title, and it's so misleading, and it puts a lot of people in a lot of shitty positions. And like even financially with the TRT clinics, fucking $300 a month for a vial of test is insane. People pay that shit. They pay it out of pocket because insurance doesn't cover it too. My dad's on TRT. He's like, yeah, I can't afford it. It's fucking $300 a month. I'm like, what are you talking about? I get you a vial of test for $80 and that'll last you the next 3 to 4 months. Like, exactly. You're insane for even fucking thinking about paying that. It's crazy. People don't know. They don't know any better.
And they only want to trust their doctor. They don't want to trust us because we're not doctors. It's crazy. But and then another thing with only relying on your doctor to monitor your health as a bodybuilder specifically is they are not going to prescribe all of the lab panels that you'd want to see as a bodybuilder in order to be fully preventative of your health.
No, so it's a pain in the ass.
I tell my clients to get these specific labs, and I'll tell different clients to get different things. But if I tell them to get let's say total testosterone LCMS, not ECLIA, or I tell them to get apolipoprotein B, or LP little a, or whatever it is in addition to their lipid panel, they tell their doctor that. Their doctor says, yeah, I'm just gonna blah 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 blah, and they get fucking half the shit that I say, and half of it's wrong also. And so it's like doctors don't prescribe in general. Like, if you go to them and you say like you're fat and you're concerned about your heart health, they measure your lipids, and then let's say your HDL and LDL are close to fine, but your ApoB actually sucks, or your LP little a shows the genetic predisposition for cardiovascular disease. Like, doctors aren't going to be testing these things because it takes more work on their end, costs more money, things like that. And so they aren't going to be as preventative in monitoring your health as someone who actually knows what they're looking for as a bodybuilder or a bodybuilding coach. And so that's why, I get my blood work through like Merrick, and I, actually can order my own labs and then get a lab requisition and then just do it all myself. And I don't have to, ask my doctor to order it. But then also, some people can just go on Merrick and like have the Merrick doctors, look at their stuff. And that's, like, some doctors are actually good, but a lot of like regular just primary care physicians that are just in it for like, the general population, like, that's not who a bodybuilder should go to, because they're just going to judge the person in general. Like, the first time I went to, before my first ever cycle, I went to a doctor to get prescribed blood work. And I went in there and I was I was a 20-year-old kid. I was natural, and I was telling her, yeah, I was on my first cycle actually. And I told her I take testosterone, I take Nolvadex, I take Exemestane. I think that was it. And she's like, what the fuck is wrong with you? Like, don't you know that this can happen? And she had to look up what these things were first. I was like, I know what I'm doing. I got a coach. I know what I'm doing. Like, mind your fucking business, bitch.
It's hard to relay because the average person just doesn't know, but the doctor doesn't know any better. So where does that leave them? And that's how it comes to any profession. It's like there's very few and far between that are actually good, and the doctors, there's very few and far between that are actually like really care about your health, rather than just making fucking money, getting you in and out of the office and doing the least work possible. Ordering labs for a doctor is always a pain in the ass. I've never had it not be a pain in the ass. They'll fucking argue back and forth. You don't need this. Why do you need insulin tested? Why do you need LCMS? You don't need that. We don't need that. Insurance isn't going to cover that. They end up charging them a fuck ton out of pocket too, compared if they go to somewhere like Synergistic Labs or Merrick. I don't know much about Merrick, but like, I can request all the exact specific lab requisitions, health markers that I want for the lab requisition. And there's nobody questioning me. And your doctor technically has to do that, right? Like, you could sit there and demand, like, I want you to write a letter that you are denying me my right to view my own health markers in my own blood, because they have to do it, but they make it so difficult when it's ridiculous. And it's just the fact that, like I said, they're not that invested into you. And that's like our job as a coach. You gotta understand, nobody's gonna care about your health more than you. Like, you have to take care of yourself first, and that's the job of a coach. A good coach, at least, is to, guide you in the right direction and actually oversee what you're doing and make sure things are going well and keep you healthy and assess your risk profile, what you're willing to take on, what you're not. The doctor's not going to fucking do that unless you have a really close relationship with a good doctor who works with athletes, and those are very hard to find. And if they are around, like, they're usually in areas, and all athletes and doctor and bodybuilders like will usually go to one guy. Like, that's the guy, that's the doctor. And I've seen some of those guys, but again, they're just very, very hard to find. So it's something that people really need to take into consideration. It's something that's very hard to say publicly, because when you say it publicly, everybody just thinks, oh, you don't have a degree. Like, he has a degree. It's like, that doesn't fucking mean anything. Does that mean anything? Like, this guy went to school to study this. He memorized things. He passed a test, and now he's been practicing in this office, prescribing fucking medicine for sinus infections for the past 20 years. What the fuck is he gonna know about preventing type 2 diabetes and how to manage cholesterol for a bodybuilder who's using exogenous hormones? Like, they're just not, they don't have experience in that field, and they don't care to learn more at a certain point because they're making so much money. It's like, why are they? That's just not their concern. So they just disregard shit, throw it off, take this, goodbye, see you later. And it's very frustrating as a coach, because all the time you'll have clients come to you and say, well, my doctor wouldn't let me order this. Say I didn't need that. It's like, I don't care what your doctor told you, bro. Like, we need all these health markers so I could see what the fuck's going on and have the full picture. If we don't have this, this, and this, then I'm just making more assumptions now. That's not accurate. And it's against it's immoral for me to tell you something when I don't have all the information I need.
Yeah, 100%. They
So
really don't know very much about steroids specifically. That's what I've come to realize is, doctors don't learn about PEDs in med school. Like, sure, they went to med school, they learned a lot of things, I'm sure, but like, it's not about what we work with and what we actually know about, like things that we look up that we're interested in. They're not interested in it. It doesn't affect them. So why would they want to know things like, you know, how does trend affect your health? How does DECA affect your health? What are things that you should take with, certain PEDs to help mitigate the negative health risks? Why should you take, a certain, supplement or, preventative health drug like Telmisartan? You know, doctors don't generally know these things unless they're also into bodybuilding or work with bodybuilders or athletes. There's not very many,
they're
obviously,
not
but
very focused or educated on preventing things and how to really like cure
yeah,
the
they
root
want to treat
problems.
things.
They just treat
Yeah.
things. They know, if you have high blood pressure, okay, we'll just prescribe you this. If you fall into the range on paper that says you're type 2 diabetic, we'll give you this. If you're not, then we're not going to give you it. It's not about preventing it. Let's just wait till it gets bad enough, then we'll prescribe you drugs to put a band-aid on it. That's how it is. And it's fucking it's terrible. I don't know. But a lot of it
That's
is
a
also
huge that's a huge difference between a coach and a doctor. Is you could take someone who has a horrible relationship with food, has a horrible diet, doesn't go to the gym, and has a little bit high, blood glucose levels, and is on the path to, putting on more body fat. The coach can recognize that and say, hey, let's get your diet in check. Hey, here's a training program. I want you to send me what your training videos look like. Hey, I want you to send me what your physique looks like every single week so that I can hold you accountable to making progress and going in the right direction. Doctor says, all right, where are you at right now? Well, your A1C is, 5.4, you're fine. And your blood glucose is this. And, you're not, type 2 diabetic. You're not even pre-diabetic yet. So it's like, you don't need to focus on anything, just have a healthy lifestyle. Yeah. And so it's like they're not really gonna give you a diet, they're not gonna be monitoring your physique or your body weight every single week. So like, you know that's why I would like get a fucking bodybuilding coach, or at least a health coach or fitness coach if you're concerned with your health or your physique or things like that. Of course it's good to have, to hear things from doctors just to make your own decisions for yourself if you're able to do that. But you shouldn't only rely on information from a doctor, because how many doctors said shit about the C word, the pandemic, and ended up being wrong just because they're doctors? People trusted them. Make sure we wear 4 masks today. And it's like just because they're a doctor, now everybody has to believe them. But then they end up saying, "Oh no, actually we were wrong," and people who actually common sense were like, "Oh,
Yeah.
well, kind of knew
I think one
that."
of the biggest ones that you always hear is fucking with the sodium. You have high blood pressure, eat less salt. That's it. That's the answer. Eat less salt. That
I heard someone say they don't eat any salt. Literally, a couple nights ago, I was at a family dinner, and this relative, it was like a 60-year-old lady. I don't put any salt on my food. I
oh
just
my
avoid salt.
God.
Salt. It's like, let me give you a little science lesson real quick.
It's all
If you don't,
outdated shit.
your body's gonna retain sodium if you don't eat sodium.
Yeah.
You're not gonna just decrease your blood pressure, permanently just from avoiding salt. Salt isn't bad in
Yeah.
general.
You drink more water. There's so many other ways to approach it. And also, if you fucking lower your sodium intake so low, I'm pretty sure that could lead to insulin resistance. No?
Let's see. So if you decrease your sodium too much with high blood pressure, you have to figure out why the blood pressure is high in the first place. So most generally, I would say most likely it's the other way around where insulin resistance will cause the high blood pressure because and then it is vice versa. High blood pressure will also decrease insulin sensitivity. So for someone who just cuts out the sodium, that's not going to solve the high blood pressure. Like sure, if you're eating excessive amounts of sodium, you're going to be bloated, obviously. If you're just eating 50,000 grams of sodium, or milligrams. But if have high blood pressure, just cutting out sodium is not going to solve the issue. You know, and most likely people who have hypertension also have insulin resistance. It's not always the same, but it's all a part of metabolic syndrome. And so if someone just loses weight, decreases their insulin resistance and improves their insulin sensitivity, that's going to improve their blood pressure. And they didn't have to touch their sodium. They could even increase their sodium if they wanted to. So, and then especially as an athlete, we already talked about how sodium is beneficial, but that's a whole other actual topic
No,
is about how. But
I was just reading this because I saw this the other day. It does if you have a low salt diet, if you go to low sodium, it can cause resistance because your kidneys will want to hold on to salt, to sodium as a protective
yeah,
mechanism, which will then increase insulin production, and then you run into the same issue. Where the pancreas will eventually, stall out and produce less insulin.
yeah. So, well, here's another way to look at it is if you eat less salt, your body's going to say, hey, we don't have enough salt. So how do we retain salt? We increase aldosterone. So when you increase aldosterone, now you have, that whole entire process of increasing the RAS system. So now you're going to have an increase in angiotensin 1, angiotensin 2, and angiotensin 2 inhibits insulin signaling. And so now you have an increase in high blood pressure because you decrease your sodium too much. And so now that high blood pressure is going to cause an increase in angiotensin, which is going to decrease insulin signaling, which can cause insulin resistance.
So
So
yeah,
yeah,
so yeah, so
exactly.
yeah, yeah. So low salt diets are not. I think there is justification for eat less salt, right? If you're eating a shit ton of fucking processed food and a ton of salt, like yeah, all
I'm
right, you
saying.
cut sodium down. It's also like relative to your water intake. First
Yeah.
call of action usually should just be to drink more fucking water because most people don't drink enough.
And
Um,
eat whole foods, not fucking, shit ton of fast food and,
uh
just
huh.
highly processed foods, things that are just like crazy high in sodium. Yeah. Especially if you're not an
Fruits,
athlete.
fiber, greens, fibers, sources.
Foods you cook yourself. You don't have to, always rely on restaurant foods, eating, 10 times the amount of sodium you should be eating because, yeah, obviously that's not good.
Yeah,
But you don't need no sodium. Like, you need sodium in order to live. And it's not like, if you cut out extra salt or added salt, you're not getting sodium. Like there's still natural sodium in foods. And I'm
yeah,
sure people who cut out sodium aren't eating all whole foods because they obviously don't know everything about their diet. So they're going to be eating, those little fiber one bars and their little Greek yogurts and their little little piece of cake here and there, even though it's not added salt. So it's like you're still getting sodium. It's just like
point is
you're
that
doing it.
doctors are telling you bullshit
Yep.
most of the time. There are exceptions,
Especially as a bodybuilder.
especially as a bodybuilder. All right. Cover that, cover this, cover that. Let's talk about real quick PEDs, performance
I love it.
enhancement drugs. Don't we all? Can't wait to get back on them, honestly. Recovery
Yeah.
from surgery, get fucking huge. Uh but how do any specific PEDs affect the pump?
Well, you can there's orals and there's injectables. So orals
Mhm.
definitely will increase the pump a lot more. The pump
Yeah.
that you get from Anadrol, Anavar, D-bol, like that increase in glycogen and increase in water retention that, hits your system a lot quicker than an injectable. That's
Mhm.
definitely going to help with the pump and increase vascularity, increase nitrogen retention, which you get an increase in nitrogen retention from all PEDs, all anabolic androgens. But then there's, the steroids, the injectables that either increase estradiol or increase aldosterone or both. So testosterone, even if you're just on, super physiological levels of testosterone, you're going to have increased levels of well, you're going to improve your insulin sensitivity, so you're going to be able to hold more glycogen. You're going to have an increase in aldosterone, so you're going to have an increase in total body water. And as we said, water is a part of the pump. You're going to increase in estradiol, which also increases water retention, um, nitrogen retention. So even just testosterone is going to be able to increase the pump. Combine that with nandrolone. So nandrolone is also going to increase water retention from increasing aldosterone. Uh, you know,
D-ball.
D-bol increases, just because it's an oral, but also it aromatizes into methyl estradiol.
D-ball will
So
make you watery and
that
give you the
increases water retention
craziest
too.
back pumps.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's from the extra water, especially. So
Uh-huh.
it's, yeah, they basically increase glycogen, they increase vascularity, they increase nitrogen retention, they increase water weight, they increase strength and performance, which also can help you get a better pump. They increase aggression, that plays a role um, in your training in order to get a pump. So steroids are the best thing for a pump, honestly.
There you have it.
Even if you're natural, take steroids and then you get a great pump.
If you're natural and you want a better pump, just take steroids.
Yeah, that's the message of this video, of this podcast.
Okay. Is there anything else we should touch on regarding the pump?
Um,
I think we covered a lot. No?
Squeeze the muscles, some people don't get a full contraction on movements, or
Mm.
they're moving too fast, slow down the movement, focus on the muscle that you're using. Uh, I think if you go a little bit lighter, it'll help with the pump. And we talked about why the pump's important, can help recovery aspect. And also, we didn't even mention the words sarcoplasmic hypertrophy yet, but there's that component also, which is not a permanent method uh of building muscle, like
Mm.
myofibular hypertrophy. Um, but sarcoplasmic hypertrophy is cool. It makes you hold more glycogen, so makes you feel bigger, makes you look bigger. Um, can it, have an effect on your recovery? Maybe, but I don't think that, that should be the goal, is training to just be able to store more glycogen. I mean, I guess it is in terms of like nutrient partitioning. So
Mm.
if you're, you know, if you're bulking and you're incorporating some sets that are higher reps, isolation movements, focusing on the contraction, the eccentric, higher reps, um, that can force more blood into the muscle. We talked about how that, just itself is going to help improve recovery, but also if you're able to store more glycogen, that'll help with nutrient partitioning, which can help with preventing as much fat gain in a bulk. So it's all theory. It's, not like factual. If you do 5 sets that are for the pump, then you're gonna be able to store this many more carbs for every single person. This works. It's like
No.
all these are theories of just like, you know, don't be scared of the pump. You know,
Mm.
it may have its benefits, but it's not the best thing that you need to be focused on. Like focus on the meat and potatoes, focus on, hard and training heavy for moderate reps and good form and things like that. Don't be scared of the pump. I would take advantage of, potentially its benefits and yeah, so
Hmm.
that's my opinion.
Well, I'm on the same page. I agree. I think we're pretty much good here. I think we covered enough. It's already running up to close to 2 hours, I believe. So, any closing thoughts?
Um, take steroid, bitch.
Anything you want to promote other than steroids?
Don't take trend.
Okay. All right. Well, there you have it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Make sure you like this video. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel. Any questions, comment down below. And we'll see you on the next episode of Brass Sack Bodybuilding.